everybody. Welcome to Inside the Album. I'm Don Seckler. That's Tommy Hilkin. I don't know which way you'll be in the video.
It's okay, Don. It's all good. Welcome back, my friend.
Yeah. So we've been away. We're going to try and pop in here and do episodes when we can. Of course,
Yeah.
you know, we're both working men and I'm fairly busy these days, which is good.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're back and we are here this week. We are going to talk about a great album from the 1970s. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about our charity that we are working for. And why don't you tell us a little bit, Tommy, about musicformark.com.
Well, there you go, Don. Good to see you, man. And this is Inside the Album, which is fantastic. So good to get back in. And who would ever thought we'd be doing an album from the 1970s? But I think that's where I think that's where I am.
Another one.
Well, let me tell you something. Iconic albums, if you really make the list, the 70s does it. So Music for Mark, you know, going forward, really looking forward to next year, really putting this together, getting it rocking. What we want to do is we're putting benefits together, a little bit of a foundation where we're going to bring musical instruments to kids who can't get their hands on them. And we want to put them in their hands and keep the world of music going. You know, you and I, one reason we're even here is what music has meant in our life and what it's done for us. You know, I don't know where I'd be without music and the love of music. So just want to keep it alive. The Music for Mark Foundation is going to be bringing musical instruments to kids. So if you have an old instrument, old guitar, we've even had somebody give us a trombone, which is fantastic. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring it out to the kids who want to learn the musical instruments. So musicformark.com. Look forward to connecting with you with that.
Yeah, so awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the album we're going to be discussing today, and it is the Eagles' Hotel California.
Woo.
Let's talk about the band first. I think probably most people who are listening to classic rock understand most of the guys in the Eagles. The lineup was mixed up a little bit over the years, and there was a major change right before this album that we'll talk about that influenced the music in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
But we start off, there's Don Felder, who's on guitar with some vocals, Glenn Frey, also another guitar player with vocals, Don Henley, and Don Henley's the lead singer of the band, but he's also the drummer, which is very unusual. You know, it's not very often you see a lead singer as a drummer. And then we have Randy Meisner on bass and also some backup vocals. And all of these guys sang, as we know that the harmonies for the Eagles were unbelievable, like almost to the level of like the Beach Boys and that kind of stuff. And then lastly, the new kid on the block the new kid in town is Joe Walsh, who was brought into the band to give the band a little bit of more of a rock edge. Came in and did some things that were a little bit heavier and a little bit more, you know, distortion in the sound. And it really kind of, you know, pushed the Eagles in a different direction because they were very kind of soft rock before this. So, you know, in the early 70s, this album was recorded at the end of 1976, in December of 1976. And before that, the Eagles it was very laid back, that Southern California, and it still is on this album as well. But they didn't really have an edge. It was a little bit more almost to the countryside, you know? Mm-hmm. So Joe Walsh made a big difference in the band. And, you know, of course, everybody on that list everybody on that list is pretty much a legend. So the album was this is the 6th album released by the Eagles, but that also includes a greatest hits album. So it's technically the 5th album of new material. And it was recorded in between March and October of 1976 in Miami and then also Los Angeles. And it was released, like I said before, on December 8th of 1976. So when I look at this album, I don't think of it as a 1976 album. I really think of it as a 1977 album because it was released at the end of the year. And most of the airplay came, you know, through December, January, February. So we moved it fully into 1977 there. So at the time on the charts, you know, we've talked about 1977 over and over and over again with a bunch of different albums.
Yeah.
But the popular albums at the time for the year were Rumors by Fleetwood Mac, Nevermind the Bollocks, Sex Pistols, The Stranger by Billy Joel, The first Clash album was out that year, and then also Street Survivors from Leonard Skinner.
There you
So
go.
even though it's the middle, the kind of the middle of the 70s here, it's quite a diversity in terms of the music that was out there. There was a real soft kind of stuff like the Billy Joel, and Fleetwood Mac, I guess, is kind of falls into that bucket.
Yeah.
Some punk bands. You've got the Sex Pistols and the Clash at the same year here, and then Southern rock. I mean, pretty much everything's here except ska.
Well, when you think about it, you just said Southern rock, right? You don't even hear that anymore. Everything is just so blended today. But Southern rock was big in our life, man, when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
The New Riders of the Purple Sage, Marshall Tucker, the Outlaws. Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of those kind of country rock bands, right?
Right. Guys, country guys who learned how to rock,
Yeah,
like the Outlaws, the guitar army. It was all about the guitar. So great
right.
stuff.
It was a
Yep.
lot of long guitar solos, right? A lot of group guitar solos,
Yeah.
and the Eagles did that too, where they had two guys play the same exact solo over each other. And it comes out amazing when done well. Sounds
layers,
awful when
yeah.
done poorly.
Yeah, but in layers, it's so good.
Yeah.
And we've seen all these guys live, so it's the power of the guitars is just tremendous. But 77, I graduated high school in 77, so
Nice.
it makes me smile. Those years of high school music was tremendous, man.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to say, the only thing I can think of today that kind of is in this genre of, or in that genre of Southern rock, not the Eagles, but like we're talking about like Leonard Skinner and things, it's probably Chris Stapleton, who's really a country artist, but he has some rock edge. So he kind of goes the other way. Whereas Leonard Skinner and those bands were rock bands with a country edge, Stapleton is a country artist with a rock edge. And so I think, that's kind of the closest of what you would find today.
Well, you know what it is, country. It's through the years. Like we said, it was Southern rock and there was country. Country music was country music. It wasn't popular. Country music exploded. So these guys want to be rockers, but they know that to stay country keeps them much more relevant in a very lucrative world right now.
Yeah.
Of country music. Yeah, it really is. It's a great way to look at it.
So this album, yeah. So this album entered the U.S. charts at number 4. The Eagles already had a couple under their belt and had a couple of hits and were already pretty popular. So this album entered the charts at 4 in the United States. It reached number 1 on its 4th week in January of 1977. And it was number 1 for 8 weeks. And I don't know how the charts go these days. I think there's less of this, but back in the day, an album would get up there and stay there for a month or 2 months. I don't think that happens as often today, but it's a whole different environment with the streaming and everything now. It's not record sales.
Dude, just the fact that we're saying album.
Yeah,
that's what it was. There was the singles charts back then. There was the Billboard Top 100.
right.
And then there was albums, right? So to get an album to be number 1 is tremendous because people used to buy the album for the song.
Right.
It was still the same way to go. You always had to have that release of the hit single that had people go out and buy the album. Different times back then. And bands touring just to sell the album. That's what I always remember that. Yeah, touring was so big.
Yeah, it was flop-sided back then because they release the albums so they can go out on tour and they make more money from touring than they do from sales.
Which is
So
I know. Yeah, I know. My first concert was like $750.
Yeah, right.
Now I'm going to see Clapton for $300.
Yeah, exactly. So and so I think when you have an album, and this album is packed with songs that were very popular. So when that happens, you get the sustainability and you get up there at the top of the chart for a long period of time.
Yep.
So the end result, and this is after many, many years, but the album has sold 26 million in the US. So it was a huge hit record back then and continues to be very popular, probably amongst the older crowd today.
It took over the airwaves, Don.
Oh, yeah.
There you go. That's a blast from the past.
Yes, definitely.
The Eagles sat down with Scott Muni.
Right. Well, that's when you had three radio stations to pick from, right? There were 3 rock stations in New York, and then it was
Philadelphia. Those were the places to go.
So the album was also ranked number 37 on Rolling Stone magazine's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time.
Wow.
So yeah,
37.
yeah, so pretty popular there with the Rolling Stone editors.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing, and I kind of was talking about this a little bit in the past or previously, we were just chatting about Joe Walsh. So Bernie Leadon, who was the original, mostly the country influence to the band, left the band after the release of the previous album, One of These Nights. So when it came to doing Hotel California, the band made a conscious decision to move away from that country sound and move more into a rock and roll sound, you know. So you've got Victim of Love, Life in the Fast Lane, those types of songs, which were a lot heavier,
Right.
you know, or a lot faster. And so that was all Joe Walsh. You know, he was Bernie was replaced by Joe Walsh, who came in right away. And one of his opening riffs was the Life in the Fast Lane riff. It was, again, one of those exercises, you know, they talk about the guitar player exercises turning
That's
into
so
songs.
funny.
And that's what this was.
Yeah. You know what's funny? I saw a story of him doing that exercise, and Glenn Fry heard it and
Yes.
said, "My God, what is that?" And he goes, "That's how I warm up before any time I play." And he was like, "No, there's a
Right.
song there, man."
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. So
The
Joe Walsh,
simplicity of it all.
just amazing, great talent, just one of my
Right.
all-time favorites. Love seeing that guy live.
Yeah, and he brought a whole new spirit to the band because, let's put it this way. Joe Walsh, a Jersey guy, by the way. Let's throw
Yes.
that out there. Yeah, boy. He's a little left of center. He's not your everyday ordinary person.
Right.
He's an interesting cat.
And I think that, and the interesting thing about it, I think there's one guy, and I'm not sure who, just one of the guys from the Eagles is from California. So the rest of them, like you said, Joe Walsh is from Jersey. They're from all over the country.
Right.
And so a lot of this, which is interesting because you think of them as the penultimate California band, right? And this, they're like they're like the flag bearer for that laid back California sound that was around in the 70s of
Right.
Jackson Brown and, I guess Bonnie Raitt was probably in there a little bit. And
Todd Rundgren.
Yeah, Todd Rundgren. And so all this stuff that was, fairly popular at the time, very mellow, kind of laid back, almost stoner music, I would say, very, floaty and drifty.
And on the flip side, you got a band like Creedence that everybody thought was like from the bayou and in New Orleans and Louisiana, and they were actually a California band.
Right. So, sometimes the story doesn't line up with the actual reality.
Yeah, you just create the image and go with it, right?
Yeah.
It works.
So here's a copy of the album cover. It's fairly iconic. It's a picture of the Beverly Hills Hotel that was shot just before sunset by David Alexander. They shot this picture. They had the idea that they wanted to do a hotel, obviously, because it's Hotel California. They had the first song was Hotel California. So that was the whole basis for the album. So they had them go out and shoot a bunch of the hotels around California. And the Beverly Hills Hotel was the one that they picked. And it's a pretty iconic picture of the sunset with the little neon Hotel California. And the interesting thing about the little neon Hotel California down at the bottom is that's actually done through manipulation of an image. They didn't actually have a neon sign built. So they did that, I guess. I don't even know. It could have been on the computer back then. It had to be that it was done by airbrush. So the artwork was actually, that was actually created artwork made to look like a neon sign. I always thought it was a real sign, but
cut and paste.
Yeah. Well, this is before that. This is when you were doing it on paper. So it was actually cut and paste. You used to cut the paper and paste it down.
You'd have to put pictures in and take a picture of that picture and then clean it up and then redo it. It was, oh my God, I remember those days.
So Don Henley wanted to find a place that could portray the Hotel California of the album title, and he wanted to portray it with a slightly sinister edge. So they actually, like I said, they went out and they photographed 3 different hotels, and this was the one they selected.
It's funny. I didn't realize that you mentioned it, but I'll throw it out there that they went from One of These Nights to Hotel California.
Yeah.
Great album, One of These Nights. I mean,
Yeah.
that when you think Eagles, you play that album. I know
Right.
Hotel California, but One of These Nights was a killer album. But truly,
But
Two Different
it's
Worlds.
all like back here. It's all
Yeah,
laid back. It's
yeah.
almost like the 90s rap, like laid back and bouncing in the sun, It's that
Yeah.
California vibe. It doesn't matter whether it's 70s music, rap music, it all comes through.
Yeah, it was a big album too, as well. But you can see the transition that you're talking about was huge. Probably what made them an even bigger touring band, Hotel California.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure after this they went on the road nonstop.
Yeah, I saw them when this album came out, and they drew in a whole new crowd.
Yeah.
In other words, welcome to rock and roll.
Right.
We're the Eagles. We're gonna rock with you now.
Right. Well, and that's what, you think about the audiences and how they break down. Usually the guys are going for the harder rock type of music, so you bring in more guys. If you have a softer music, a little bit more laid back, you generally have more of the ladies. So to mix those up, now you got everybody.
Yeah, it's like the Sausage Fest at Rush.
Yeah.
I always hear that. Rush is just a sausage fest. That's amazing.
Hey, if that's your thing, go for it, Tom.
There you go. Italian sausage.
Yeah.
Premio.
Premio.
All right, I digress. Come on, back to rock and roll.
So another interesting thing while they were recording the album, Black Sabbath was recording Technical Ecstasy in the next studio in Miami. So the Eagles had to stop recording multiple times because Black Sabbath was too loud and the sound was coming through the wall. The last track of the album, The Last Resort, had to be re-recorded a bunch of times because of that. So Sabbath, was leaking into the Eagles recording session. So that's interesting.
Oh, that's awesome. Think about, just the bass, the pounding of the walls.
Yeah, right. The bass and the drums for Sabbath is going to go wherever it wants.
Oh, wherever it wants. Yeah. I'm sure they were scared next door.
Yeah, right. Sabbath was scary back then. And people don't realize that. Like back in the 70s, there was nothing that heavy or scary, as Black Sabbath.
Right. Like I said, they had their image for sure, man. They lived up to it,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They played into it.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's get started with the tracks here. We're going to start off with the title track, and I'm sure everybody knows this. This one is Hotel California. So to me, this song, a lot of it is the guitar stuff. You know, as a guitar guy, I listen to just the lines and the way it's weaving in and out with the different parts. It's just amazing. I mean, legendary song.
Oh, beautifully done. I was just thinking as we were listening to his guitar in the opening, yeah, I wonder if they put that together on the piano because it fits so well. The beginning of the guitar work to be played on a piano. I was just like, because you see a lot of times when they're composing a song, they'll just start bouncing it around on a piano, like McCartney always did that, and then it became
Yeah, I don't
very,
know.
very cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or they
definitely
just sat
possible.
down and jammed. Yeah, it depends on where the jam comes from, right? I love
Well,
that.
yeah, and the chord progression and the basic melody came from Don Felder, so he came up with that part. Don Henley wrote most of the lyrics. Glenn Fry contributed a little bit there. And the thing was that Henley noticed he was talking about how the hotel had become a literal and symbolic focal point of their lives at that time. And so that was like the theme of the song. And it was from here, this is the first song they had. And then they kind of built out this story around this song by adding on the other songs. So Glenn Fry wanted it to be, you know, Henley says, okay, this is a literal thing about what's going on in our lives. Glenn Fry wanted it to be more cinematic and make it just like a movie. So you have that kind of combination. And I think when you have those two points of views, even though they're kind of diametrically opposed because one's literal and one's kind of fictional, it still adds a lot of flavor to it that I think is, with this album, especially with the Eagles a lot, I think what you see is you've got these mixes of things that you wouldn't normally think go together. And they do come together, and they come together perfectly. Like everything fits where it belongs, you know?
Well, in this song especially, the whole layout comes together nicely.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I had heard, you know, this was in their mindset of what rock and roll was doing to them as people. And, you know, what rock and roll was back then, the hard drug use, the life on the road, the drinking, you know, just the whole concept behind, you know, everybody thinks the great life of a rock and roller.
Right.
And the 70s were hard hitting, you know.
No, this is, yeah. And this is, they were going for that. They were going for, here's the dark side of this lifestyle of excess, you know? And I think a lot of that is like, it's them. I think a lot of it too is them as outsiders, because again, they're not from California, but now they're in California and seeing, you know, it's 1976. There's cocaine everywhere, you know, and it's, I think that they're seeing the effects of that. And you see, and now they're talking about, even though the songs are all kind of upbeat, it's still kind of, here's the dark side of that life.
Right. There's a meaning to them behind it. That's what I had heard.
Yeah, for sure. And parts of this lyrics for Hotel California and for Wasted Time were based on Don Henley's breakup from his then girlfriend, Lori Rodkin.
Oh, Lori Rodkin.
Yeah. You know her?
No. Do you?
No. I just read about her online.
She must have been hot if he wrote a song about her.
Yeah, right. The other interesting thing about this was, so Don Felder recorded, they recorded the song about a year after he did the original demo of it. So he'd had it for a while. And so when they're in the session, he started to improvise the guitar part at the end. And Don Henley stopped him and said, he's got to do it exactly like it is on the demo, because he thought it was so good. So Felder had to call his wife and have her play him the cassette of the demo over the phone.
Oh, how
so
cool.
Felder could remember what he played.
Yeah.
Like now everybody's, you know, you got your iPhone in your pocket, and a lot of musicians record stuff on their phones, and now they got it with them at all times, anywhere they go. You know, it's a whole different thing back then, you know, a phone that was attached to the wall. You got to call your wife, hope she's home. Yeah. Honey, find the cassette player, get that tape, play it.
Wow. Yeah.
So
think about it, you know, it's a whole different way of creativity. It really was. Everything wasn't so accessible, like you said, and you had to work at it. You know, even the recordings of the music now, you know, back in the day, you literally had to be in the studio, like you said. Now you can just pop it in and, hey, what do you think it is? You know, send it in a text to your bandmates.
Right. Yeah, my
Yeah,
son writes and records, and he'll do stuff on the computer. It sounds like a band, you know. He's got drums and everything, and he doesn't, you know, it's all a lot of it's electronic, but you know, he
sure.
layers the guitars on top of that, and he could create a whole album right in his bedroom.
Oh, that's great.
So the other thing is, one other thing about the album was that it was recorded at 3 different sessions before they, this song was recorded in 3 different sessions before they got the right version, the version they wanted. But the biggest problem they were running into was finding the right key for Henley's vocal. So, you know, it's super important. You got to match up the key of the music to the ability of the singer. Otherwise, he's not going to be able to hit the notes.
Right. You know, one of the keys to everything is singing in key, which nobody really realizes. I'm dead serious. It's like, you know, that's why bands or touring bands end up having to bring it down a few octaves later in life, because they can no longer sing in the key of the original song.
Right, exactly. And I just saw Pearl Jam last week, and they do exactly that now. Eddie Vedder is, you know, he's got to be around my age, is probably around 60. And so they dropped it down a half a step on a bunch of songs so that it's, you know, he can hit those notes.
Yeah, the first band I saw do that, and you got to give them credit for even trying it, was Zeppelin, because as a kid, you know, Robert Plant could wail out anything at any time.
Right.
As he got older, dude, the voice was just cracking. You just couldn't do it. You know,
yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And that's why you don't see, that's why Robert Plant is not ever going to do Led Zeppelin again.
No, because he isn't Led Zeppelin.
Because he can't sing that stuff. David Lee Roth is not going to come out. There's supposed to be a tribute to Eddie Van Halen at some point, but the rumors are that David Lee Roth is, you know, kind of being a pain in the butt and won't, you know, doesn't want to participate or I don't know what the details are, but I think part of it is that he can't sing anymore. He can't sing those high notes that he used to do in Van Halen. I mean, how could you? You know?
I'll give you a little tip on David Lee. I don't think he ever could sing.
I like Dave.
No, he was great. You know, I seen him a couple times. I really did. Dude, Yankee Rose. I remember those days with Steve.
He's a lot more screaming and Humana.
I digress, as we say. Yeah. So yeah, the challenge of getting the voice in key, so important.
Yeah, so important. All right, let's move on to the next track. This one is New Kid in Town.
There's talk on the street, it sounds so familiar. Great expectations, everybody's watching you. People you meet, they all seem to know you. Even your old friends treat you like you're something new. Johnny come lately, the new kid in town. Everybody loves you, so don't let them down.
So this one is a lot more in the vein of, you know, traditional Eagles, right? It's that laid back, dude. It's nice. It's pretty. And it was the 3rd #1 hit for the band, this song. So super popular song.
Chicks dug it.
Yeah, exactly. And so Don Felder said that he, when they came up with the Hotel California concept, other song ideas kind of came from that, including this one. So the idea is once you arrive in LA and now you have a first couple of hits, now you're the new kid in town. So it's almost, you know, again, it's kind of outsider's view of what was going on in Southern California in the 70s.
And maybe a little bit of insecurity, you know, knowing we're working hard here.
A little bit, you know, I think it's kind of a mix of, you know, I always remember the video for Appetite for destruction where Axl Rose gets off the bus in Hollywood.
Mm.
You know, you're coming from Iowa or Illinois or Jersey or wherever, and now here you are in the thick of, you know, the Strip and Sunset Strip in California, and it could be quite a culture shock for a lot of people.
So how this song, right, as I hear it and listen to it, and you were just saying, and we're going to discuss it, the idea that one of these nights to Hotel California, what was the difference? If this was still the Eagles without Joe Walsh, it would have been an completely acoustic song, super mellow, but you could hear Joe Walsh in the background just throwing in some licks along with the electric.
Right, right. And it's subtle. It's subtle, but if you listen, you can hear it in there.
Oh, it's there. Yep.
Yeah.
That's the difference. They would have been strumming guitars sitting on stools and doing this in the, so this is where they progressed. And what Joe Walsh brought is a little more background, you know, electric guitar.
And it's interesting because Joe Walsh, you know, before the Eagles was in the James Gang and then was solo. And so he's a guy who always did his own thing. And now he's with the Eagles and he's fitting right in.
Right.
Like he's in that song, but you don't even notice that he's there, really, unless you really listen for it. And that to me is genius, you know?
Yeah.
Like, how do you take a guy who's like got these crazy riffs and it's always the driving, funky stuff, and he fits into something that's pretty mellow, you know?
Well, when you think about Joe Walsh, we both agree, and we've seen him and love him. He's truly a guitar genius. He just So you could put him anywhere. He's playing with anybody, anywhere, anytime. As a matter of fact, now that I think about it, you know, he used to tour with Ringo because he loved doing it. You know, and he would play guitar with Ringo's all-star band all the time.
Well, you know, they're brothers-in-law, right?
Was that right?
Yeah, that's why he does it.
Barbara Bach, right, is something Ringo's wife.
No, Ringo's current wife is sisters with Joe Walsh's current wife. I don't know how many wives they've each had, but.
Oh, I don't know. I think Ringo's still married to Barbara Bach, or no?
Is he? I don't know.
So, yeah.
I don't know. But they're brothers-in-law. Like they're buddies. They're like family.
Hey, Joe, I need you to play guitar for a little while.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what happened.
Anything to get me out of the house, Ringo. I'm good. That's the friendships you want, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. I'll see you in a year. Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
All right, so let's take a listen to the next track. This one is "Life in the Fast Lane," and here we're gonna hear a lot more Joe Walsh on the record. Yeah, they doubled it up. You hear that? And there's his funk, the Joe Walsh funk, right?
No doubt.
was a hard-headed man. He was brutally handsome. And she was terminally pretty.
So good.
She held him up and he held her for ransom in the heart of the cold, cold city. He had a nasty reputation as a cruel dude. They said he was ruthless, said he was cruel. They had one thing in common, they were good and bad. She said, faster, faster, the lights are turning red. Life in the fast lane surely make you lose your mind. Life in the fast lane.
So this song, I mean, you can hear that Joe Walsh guitar throughout the song, under Henley singing and under all the other riffs, and I could listen to just that, and it's just amazing to me. I love that. I love this song.
You know, when you think about it, you and I, we talk a lot about this, is sometimes when you're listening to a song, you just get caught up in the whole song. And every now and then, like I'm in my car, I'll just listen, I'll focus in on the music. What's going on behind the vocals?
Right.
And it just blows you away sometimes that, you know.
Yeah.
You know, the first time I ever started doing that, somebody told me to listen to Otis Redding sitting on the dock of the bay. Now you listen to Otis Redding, it sounds,
Sure.
but if you hear what the band is playing behind him,
Yeah.
perfect. It blows you away. So this is that kind of an album where you can listen to the musicianship of
Right.
what's going on.
And
I agree with you.
It's the difference of actually like listening and hearing each of the parts,
Right.
or just kind of listening to the song and driving along and mindlessly humming the lyrics kind of thing. But
Sure.
yeah, it's so layered and so deep, and it's a mix of, it's not super heavy. He's got a teeny little bit of distortion on there, but it's a kind of a nice funky riff, and it's in the, he's in and out of the pocket with it. It's so good. I love that.
Yeah, it's catchy.
Yeah, so the title for it, Life in the Fast Lane, was inspired by a conversation between Glenn Fry and his drug dealer during a high-speed car ride.
Wow.
Hey, let's do some blow and drive real fast through the canyon.
Let's do it. But then they might have even had like a Maserati, who knows?
Yeah, probably. It was probably like a Lamborghini, Maserati, something super crazy.
Yeah.
I'm amazed
about that Clapton got arrested for driving 170 miles an hour. Like, dude, you're Eric Clapton, slow down.
Yeah, right. Well, in those cars though, that's just getting out of second gear.
True, the Maserati, crazy. Yeah.
But it's amazing to me that there weren't more like drug-related car accident deaths of rock stars in the 70s. That seemed to happen in the 80s a lot more. Like who was it? Vince Neil crashed a car and killed somebody, and a bunch of the 80s bands had those kind of accidents.
The drummer from
Hanoi Rocks.
No, and the drummer from Lost His Arm.
Oh, Def Leppard.
Def Leppard.
Yeah. So you would think, but I guess maybe it was the drugs like went way up in the 80s, maybe. I don't know, but it was definitely, people were more messed up driving around back then.
Yeah. You know what? The 70s still had a little bit of mellowness to it. It was like,
right.
We're rock stars. We're
right.
blitzed, but we're not going, unless, even Ozzy didn't drive.
Right. Yeah. The 80s was more like, I'm messed up. What can I do? It was more frantic, I think.
Maybe that's where the mosh pit started in the 80s. I'm
it
not
did.
Sure.
It did. Yeah, moshing started in the 80s with
there you go.
The punk and the hardcore bands in the early 80s.
Yeah, let's get lit up and punch each other in the face. Beautiful.
So like we said before, the riff for the Life in the Fast Lane was an exercise, a warm-up exercise for Joe Walsh, and the band heard it and they said, we got to turn this into a song.
Right.
So the song describes a man and a woman who had everything but lost it because of their lifestyles. So this is where we talked about that kind of dark, it's really a kind of a dark view of California life at the time.
Yeah, very interesting. It really is.
Somebody said that, well, the Eagles bandmates may have exhibited some symptoms described in this song. Joe Walsh said, yeah, that's probably true. And I think it was healthy, though, that we realized running around in parties and fast cars was really not the answer. It was kind of shallow approach to the way we're on this planet. And it probably came as a band consciousness. But Joe Walsh is saying that about the 70s. Joe Walsh was pretty fucked up in the 80s too.
Well, you do realize that one of the things that the band did, they brought Joe Walsh in knowing his talent, knowing he was a mess. And they got to the point where the Eagles told Joe Walsh, clean up or get out. He talks about it all the time.
Yeah.
He said, I'm always an Eagle. I always want to be an Eagle. Right? He's so proud that he's an Eagle, Joe Walsh. That's one of the loves of his life. But he was a full-blown drunk. I believe he's still sober today.
Yeah, he is. I know for a fact that he is, but he really was in the 80s is when they had that talk with him. So it was a little bit later than this, but he was in bad shape. He used to go on Howard Stern and come in at 7 a.m. and be out of his mind, wasted.
Remember?
Either on coke or drunk or whatever.
I remember it well, and I remember one of the stories he told, and it was great. Glenn Fry told him he could never do Desperado. I remember he was talking about, don't you ever sing Desperado. And he came in lit up, and the first song he did was Desperado.
Desperado, right. And it was amazing. I heard that happen, actually. Yeah. Joe Walsh doesn't have the traditional best voice, but he has an amazing voice.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
and he sang that song, and I was like, damn, this is so good.
So good. I remember they yelled at him for it, like, don't you?
But he's basically like just giving him the finger and saying, fuck you, I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah, those were the days, man. You just reminded me. Great, great days when Joe Walsh was on Howard Stern.
Yeah,
Great days.
so good,
How
so good.
they loved each other. It was great.
All right, let's take a listen to the next one. The next track up here is Wasted Time.
Well, baby, there you stand with your little head down in your hand. Oh my God, can't believe it's happening again. Your baby's gone and you're all alone, and it looks like the end. You're back out on the street, and you're trying to remember. How do you start it over? You don't know if you can. You don't care much for a stranger's touch, but you can't hold your man. You never thought you'd be alone this far down the line. I know what's been on your mind. You're afraid it's all been wasted time.
So this track is Don Henley and Glenn Frey trying to do a Philly soul torch song. So Frey later explained on the liner notes in The Very Best of the Eagles that he loved the records coming out of Philadelphia at the time. And he went and got some sheet music so that he could learn some of those songs. And he started creating his own musical ideas with that Philly influence. So he said Don Henley was our Teddy Pendergrass. He could just stand out there all alone and wail and, you know, really belt out those songs. So they did this whole big Philly type production with strings and the piano. And he said, again, this is a conscious decision to get away from that country rock, you know, so they're making every effort to change the band and where, because the band was over here.
Yeah.
And now they're making conscious efforts doing all these different things, heavier, Philly soul. It's a whole mix of stuff that's just so different, but it's also good.
Yeah, I wish I was in the room when Glenn Frey said that, because I would have said, he might be your Teddy Pendergrass, but he is no Teddy Pendergrass.
Yeah. I mean, Don Henley's got a great voice, but he is not Teddy Pendergrass, not even close.
Dude.
But that's what they're going, at least, you know, but at least they're honest about, hey, we're doing this, you know, not as a ripoff, but in this style, because this is where we're trying to get. So you get a whole different sound to this record.
Yeah, I get it. Getting a little taste of all the genres, you know?
Yeah.
A little Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. Come on now, the best.
So that's the end of the first side of the record, if you're on the album. And so when you flip the record over and start the second side, you get this song. So again, this is a Wasted Time reprise, if people are not aware. And again, a whole nother sound. This is an orchestral, it's a classical, it's the strings.
Yeah.
And you know, on the other, the Wasted Time regular version, yeah, they've got some strings and stuff, but it's that Philly soul sound. Yeah. Now here you take the strings and you create something that sounds like it's from the Boston Pops, or, you know, an intermission at a show or something.
I wonder who the first person to throw a reprise on their album. You know, a couple of the greatest
Yeah.
ones is Sergeant Pepper's.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one that comes to mind. But I remember a lot of bands would always have that. It would just say it was like a different version of the same song on the album, which
And
ain't the
usually,
worst thing in the world.
yeah, usually it had
Cool.
little to no lyrics, right? So there was
Yep.
some, but not all. But it's a great. I love seeing different versions of songs.
Sure.
You know, there's some artists who I follow who do like they'll do a whole album and then redo the whole album like acoustic or something like that, or you know, do it different ways. So it can be very interesting. I like it.
Well, when you're saying about the music like that, yeah, I've seen Neil Young a couple times, and you want to talk about pulling something off. I've gone and seen Neil Young doing a whole acoustics show,
Oh yeah,
and then see Neil Young with Crazy Horse,
right,
and you can't say which one is better.
right.
It's just
Oh, it's
amazing.
two totally different things. It's him at a piano or with an acoustic guitar, or it's him with the giant stacks of amps and the crunching distortion with he's got this secret amp thing that he has under the stage, but it's just amazing to see that
Same
live.
guy, same songs,
Yeah.
two different versions. I've always had a good time with that. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, so cool. All right, so let's get back to another one of the rockers. We'll pick it up with this one, track number 6. This is Victim of Love.
Wow.
What kind of love have you got? You should be home, but you're not. A room full of noise and dangerous boys still make you thirsty and high. I heard about you and that man. There's just one thing I don't understand. You say he's alive and he put out your fire. How come you still got his gun in your hand? Victim of love, I see a broken heart. You got your stories to tell. Victim of love, it's such an easy part, and you know how to play it so well.
So again, here's the Joe Walsh influence, another rocker, just, you know, almost heavy, right?
Oh, you got some slide in there.
A little bit, yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But this sound too, you know, the thing about, and this Victim of Love specifically, the Eagles did a lot of songs after this that kind of sound like this.
Mhm.
You know, on the long run, what the heck is that? I can't remember the name of the song now. But there's a song that sounds very similar to On the Long Run that sounds very similar to Victim of Love.
Yeah.
So in this one, the lead vocals were a bit of a source of contention because Don Felder came up with the idea for the song and wanted to sing it. And he remembers being promised a lead vocal on the album and thought this would be the place. So Don Henley says they let him record the vocal, but it wasn't good enough, basically. So to distract Felder, the band's manager, Erzing Azoff, took him out for a meal while Henley recorded his version.
Yeah. You know, before you even brought this up, I literally said to myself, even with Glenn Fry, whoever else was involved, this was the time where Don Henley became the lead singer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he really stepped up and kind of took control of the band, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. This is where he stepped into being Don Henley.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know. I've heard rumors over the years that he was a bit of a dick, but who knows? This is kind of a dicky thing, though, that he did to Felder. But the other thing was that Don Felder heard it and he goes, look, I can't argue. Henley's vocal is way better than mine. So,
Well, that's fair.
you know, in the end, you know, they settled on it, and then this is what you have. It's an amazing, legendary song.
Yeah, it's a good song. And you know, Joe Walsh, you know, anytime you can throw
Again,
some slow
yeah.
guitar in there, yeah, it's beautiful.
And that decision to make the Eagles more rock was the best decision they ever made, because after this, now they had a string of hit records that were immensely popular with everybody. It was just everywhere.
Yep.
All right, let's see. Oh, and here's one other thing. Don Henley said that Don Felder demanding a lead vocal on this song would have been the equivalent of him demanding to play lead guitar on the song Hotel California.
Wow, that's not nice.
Yeah, so basically, so you don't know, is Henley an asshole or not?
Listen, you know, define asshole. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's, you know, is he doing the best thing by the band? You know what I mean? Somebody has to be the leader. Somebody has to take charge. You know, when I watched the Get Back documentary, you know, everybody always talked about it was John and Yoko. John was so cool, so funny, so fun the whole throughout the sessions. And Paul was he just decided that was the time that he was going to be the leader of the band, you know, and you could see it. Was he a dick? I don't know.
Well, they were rudderless because the manager had died.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So somebody had to step up and deal with all the shit, all the biz.
Yeah, I got it. And that's the part. Everybody loves the show. Nobody loves the biz. I tell you that all the time. So true.
So this song too, Victim of Love, was played in the studio and it was live. So it was recorded live.
Oh,
They redid the vocals a little bit and the harmonies, but everything else was recorded live, which, you know, was not the way the Eagles were doing it for the most part at that time.
Man, you know what? Sometimes when you think about, like, you know, the Stones used to go in and, you know, sit in the studio and 2 takes.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally do the vocals and just playing together.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, man. I'd love to watch that happen.
All right, let's move on to the next track. This is number 7. It's Pretty Maids All in a Row. It's a bit of a fade in here.
Never thought about it. I guess it's Henley on piano.
I don't know. Might be Joe Walsh.
Could be. I'll have to check that out.
I'm not sure.
Took me till I was almost 60 years old to realize the piano was a percussion instrument.
Oh, it is Joe Walsh on piano.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
Cool.
sorry, I had that here in my notes.
There you go.
Hi there, how are ya? It's been a long time. Seems like we've come a long way. My buggy runs so slow, and heroes they come and they go, and leave us behind as if we're supposed to know why do we give up our
So like we said, this is Joe Walsh on piano, and he's actually playing the synthesizer part too,
Okay.
instead of guitar. And so here's another totally new sound for this band. So this is an
Yeah,
album where, you know, while it's an Eagles album, yeah, and it's still Southern California rock, he's got all these bits that have come in to kind of revitalize the band and throw in some fresh blood. And so Joe Walsh said that to make the Eagles really valid as a band, it was important that they co-wrote things and shared things. And he wrote this song as a kind of a melancholy reflection on his life. And he wanted to represent it as a statement that would be valid for people from our generation on life so far. So Joe Walsh came in with this song and was, you know, working with the band to put it together and make it an Eagles song. And Henley,
You know, it's great that, you know, this is where it is. If you're going to be a band, you got to be a band. And that's the one thing I'll always give credit to Joe Walsh. In many interviews,
Yeah.
he said, "I'll always be an Eagle."
Right. He never, like, he could have been like a Clapton or somebody who just says, okay, it's my way or the highway, because he's always been, it was the James Gang was his band, basically.
Yeah.
And then his solo work is him. So it's like here now he's in a situation with, Glenn Fry, Don Felder, Don Henley, Meisner, everybody in the band is super talented.
Yeah.
And now it's not Joe Walsh and everybody else. It's all these guys are all kind of in the same boat. But Henley and Fry loved this song and they thought it was really meaningful, and they helped a lot in terms of the writing and the putting together the final version of the song.
And you and I have the same feelings about Joe Walsh. He could sing "Mary Had a Little Lamb," and I'm listening to it.
Yeah, and he doesn't have, the traditional best voice.
Oh, God, no.
Like it's like Neil Young. Neil Young doesn't have a great voice, but it's unique and it's his own thing, and the way he does it is so good.
Dude, a lot of the superstars, think about Johnny Cash and Bob Seger, right? And Bob Seger, how did Bob Seger, with the voice he had, right? You think people didn't tell him you can't sing?
Yeah.
Interesting.
All right. So let's move on to track number 8. And this one is a Randy Meisner song. It's Try and Love Again. So this song, again, this is to me more kind of old school Eagles, right?
Yep.
But again, another popular song that was, did fairly well, and I think is a really nice song here at the end.
Meisner had a great voice.
Yeah.
Great voice. I don't know what happened to him. Now someday we'll have to figure out, why he got tossed. But I always think of Randy Meisner because I was in Giant Stadium and he was the guy who sang "Take It to the Limit." Oh,
okay.
And they did that in Giant Stadium with 75,000 people singing "Take It to the Limit."
Yeah,
and I never.
That's amazing.
Moment of my life. I never forgot that. He had a tremendous voice, but underused for sure, which is maybe what happens.
Well, that's what happens when you got a band with 5 songwriters, And, he's the bass player, and usually, most bands, you don't see the bass player as writing as much, but it depends, Led Zeppelin, John Paul Jones wrote a bunch of songs and things like that. So, I mean, he's a super talented guy, just a tremendous voice and, kind of a nice mellow song, Yeah,
it's good stuff. What, like you said, picking and choosing who's going to sing the songs, right? It's tough.
Or which songs are going to make it on the album. This is an album with 9, so when albums come out today, since they're a lot of times they're not on vinyl, you could have 16 songs. Now they're doing, they're doing 8, 9, 10. You get like 12 songs was your max, I guess, right? On a record back in the day.
Back in the day, yep.
And so you got to pick and choose.
Unless it was Yes, then it was 2 songs. So.
Yeah, right. 1 per side.
1 per side. I used to love that. Close to the edge, one side, the whole song. Right.
Ridiculous.
But, you're talking about bands coming together, and I always think about it. McCartney and Lennon, right? Great songwriters in their own. And the difference between being in the band is McCartney always wanted to be on Lennon's songs, singing, even if it was background. But Lennon never felt he needed to sing on McCartney's songs. So that whole dynamic is always stuck in my head.
Hmm.
John was okay with, hey, it's your song, go for it. I don't need to be
Right.
heard on it. You know?
Yeah. All right. So let's listen to the album closer. This one is The Last Resort.
She came from Providence, one in Rhode Island, where the old world shadows hang heavy in the air. She packed her hopes and dreams like a refugee, just as her father came across the sea. She heard about a place people were smiling. They spoke about the red man's weight and how they loved the land. And they came from everywhere to the great divide, seeking a place to stand or a place to hide. Down in the crowded bars, out for a
So this song, you know, I had no idea what this song was about until I researched it. And I don't know, like now I can hear it in the lyrics, but
Okay.
it's a song about how people from the Eastern United States ruined the West when they killed the Native Americans. And he was saying the further West America goes, the more commercial it gets. I just thought it was a nice little song, and I used to hum along to it, right? And I had no idea. It's about, you know, the white man killing off the Native Americans and taking their land.
But if the lyrics were like, you killed the Indian, it might not have worked as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, but it just goes to show you how a lot of times you don't listen to the lyrics, right? You don't pay attention.
But they
And
have no
you
meaning.
just kind of, yeah, right. You don't catch the meaning. Yeah, that's probably
Right,
what it
right,
is
right.
more than anything.
You know, like we always say in life, there's people who hear and then there's people who listen. And it's two
Right.
different things in life, especially
Yeah.
if you're married. Oh boy.
Yeah. And it's so, but a nice little ending, you know, very
Yeah.
nice little song by Don Henley, and you know, a nice ending to the album. I love it. So there it is, Hotel
There it is.
California by the Eagles.
Us talking about Hotel California by the Eagles.
There you go.
All right, I got two things to say. I told you earlier, I'm going to give you my opinion.
Okay.
When this album came out, I couldn't listen to it enough. I could just constantly play it.
Right.
I will say the radio stations have worn out every single one of those songs on that album to the point of becoming unlistenable. I mean it. Even Hotel California, if you keep your radio on, it's coming on 5 times a day.
Right.
It's just one of those great tune. You always want to hear it. And then I look and I go, nah.
See, that's the one thing I think that's way better about music now than back then, is that back then you had very limited options of what you were going to listen to. In most places, you had one rock station or maybe two.
Yep.
And those stations play the same songs over and over and over again. If you listen to a rock station in the 70s for 12 hours, you'd hear Hotel California 3 times.
That's what I'm saying. It was great. I loved the album. I loved playing it in my room, you know, great sound system, rocking. And then after a while, everywhere you went, it was on.
Yeah.
And, you know, you were talking about rock stations, and the reason those songs were played over and over and over, you know, you go back to those days, it was called payola. You know, the record companies needed their songs to be played.
Right.
So envelopes or brown bags were dropped off on people's desks, you know.
In the radio stations, yep.
Oh, yeah. Hey, play our song, please.
Yeah.
Go get your wife something nice.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and you know, actually, when I was in college in the late 80s, and I interned at a record company, and one of the jobs we had was to call the radio stations and talk up the songs. We weren't you give them bribes, but
Somebody was.
somebody was. It wasn't us.
Somebody was. Just wasn't you.
Yeah, it wasn't me. But
All
the thing is, now you got so many different alternatives. So you could, you got
Oh.
curated Spotify playlists that change every week, which I love because I discover a lot of new music that way.
Best.
You
The
got
best.
Sirius, you've got regular radio, you got different sources on, internet and SoundCloud and TikTok even is, breaking
I'll
music.
throw it
So
out to you. I started using Amazon Music because I have Prime. Right now, you say what you will, just killer. After 2 weeks, they have it up there and say, "Here, just click this button to hear your music."
right.
And I mean, sometimes I sit there and I go, "Wow."
They do
Where
a
did they
great
find-
job.
Yeah.
The algorithms do a
Yeah.
great job of actually picking music for you.
My
And that's
life
what
is now an algorithm. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's good because, I usually listen to Spotify, but I get there's a couple of playlists I get each week, new releases. And then I forget what the other one is. It might be like the bands I like and their new music, but it's a great way to find new stuff, that you haven't heard before. And so it's a good, I think there's a lot more opportunity for discovery these days.
And the music is still alive and well. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So I leave you with this on my end, Don Seckler. One of my favorite rock and roll trivia questions. I'm not looking to stump you, but how did the Eagles come together as a band? Where was the first time they played together as a band?
First time. Well, I do actually know this answer. They
All
were
right,
Linda
go ahead.
Ronstadt's backup band.
They were Linda Ronstadt's band. Yes, they were. There you go. Good job, man.
You can't stump me, Tom.
Come on. Stump the Don.
Stump the Don.
There
All
you
right.
go. All right. There it
That's
is,
it.
Don. Nice job, man.
Yeah, thanks. Hotel California. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned. I don't know when the next episode's going to be, but we'll get to it eventually.
Yeah, when we get these two old guys back on a computer. There you
Yeah, so click the buttons, do the things, check it
Yeah.
off, like it, share it,
go.
whatever,
Like us, tell a friend, delete
Yeah.
us, whatever you got to do.
whatever.
We're good.
All right.
All
Take
right, good
care.
seeing you.
Thanks
Bye.
for listening. Bye.